Hey guys, and welcome back to the channel. I am back with another episode of the Mum and Teen series. I am super excited, but also for many this may be an awkward topic to speak about. So in today's episode we are going to be speaking about how to talk to our children about relationships. Child, this one I have battled with and almost lost my mind about, and I'm not exaggerating, I'm telling the truth. So I wrote a little definition of relationships, because when many people think about relationships pertaining to one another, they automatically think about a relationship between a man and a woman. Now, relationships can come in many forms. It can come in a friendship, it can come in a situationship, it can come in a family ship, it can come in a workship, meaning working relationship. Might be making up all these words, but relationships are formed in many different categories and many different, areas. So I don't want us to solely focus on boys, or the opposite sex, shall I say, but I really want to focus on relationships in a whole, because our relationship with our children, it's a relationship. I'm the mother, you're the child. This is a mother and daughter relationship. So this is a little different definition that I wrote for myself. So it says relationship. This can be with the opposite sex as a friendship, or the opposite sex as a partnership or family. So these are some of the things that I'm going to talk about today. Relationships, as I said before, are can be very difficult to discuss when it comes to talking with our children. So I want to talk about it from the perspective of, first and foremost, friendships. Now, as our children get on in age, it is very difficult to, I would say, ensure that you are in the right circle of friends. And sometimes that can take time, especially with teenagers. They're getting to know themselves. They're not really sure where they fit, how they fit, and they're trying to fill themselves around. And sometimes they push themselves in a group because they don't have confidence to be in another group. But I think it's very important to talk to our children about relationships, especially friendships. Sorry, I'm looking down because I've got some notes. So the first thing first I would say is to test your children when it comes to relationships. Testing does not mean playing fool to catch wise, but just asking your children simple questions like, what is your definition of a good friendship? How do you define a good friend? What would you define your whole friendship circle to be? For example, they might say, oh, we're funny, we're loud, we're quiet, we're this, we're that. There's so many things that you can define your friendship by. Define your children's friendship circle by asking them questions. So I think it's very important to test your children's friendships by asking them questions to get a feel of it. I think it's also important as parents that you know who your children's friends are. And my children say I am so strict, but I do not allow anybody in my house. And also, if the person is coming to my house, the parents need to know, I need to know the parents, and all that kind of stuff. I don't play games with people's children, for nobody's children to come here and call my name for anything, And I would expect the same for my children. But it's really important that our children are comfortable to bring their friends around, and also that they are, we know who their friends are. I think that's really important. It takes me a while, and when my daughter continues to mention a name, I'm like, okay, this friend sounds solid, or when she comes with a random name, I'm like, I ain't heard her before. I'm gonna have to hear her a lot more times before she comes through here. Being involved in your children's conversations, that doesn't mean to eggs up yourself, but let your friends, your children's friends know that you're about this life. I am about, my children know I'm about seeing their friends on FaceTime, etc. The next point I would move on to is to talk to our children about relationships. And I'm going to factor this in the relationships to do with the opposite sex. Now, this is one of the most challenging things that has happened with me, with my children, and it's talking to them about boys, boys' intentions, friendships, defining the difference between friendships and relationships. If you feel that you need to get into a relationship, what is a relationship? Do you understand the definition of a relationship? How do you define a relationship? Questions. It is so important. Okay, you want to get into a relationship. Why do you want to get into a relationship? Oh, so we can do this and we can do that. Okay, but you can do that as friends. So why do you feel that you need to be together to do this thing that you could do as friends? And it's not about catching them out, but it's really about them actually getting to think for themselves, and let them hear their own thoughts. Because sometimes you can have this idea or this ideology and you're like, yeah, this is going to be so great. And really when it's thought out, it's just like, is there really any point in this right now? So yeah, I think it's really important to talk about these things when it comes to our children. Hold on one second. Okay, so the next thing I want to talk to you about pertaining to a relationship is to testify. Now, what do I mean about testify? I mean, it is important that we talk to our children about our own relationships, past issues that we have had, good encounters, bad encounters, understanding the fruit of a true friend, understanding the fruit of somebody that is supposed to be there for you as in a relationship. Share with your children your ups and downs. I think it's so important because our children go into things blindly, not actually getting an understanding of anything, but actually feeling their way through as if they're blind when they don't have to. When you have adults that have been there and been through certain things. Now, I'm not saying that we share things to scare our children, and to be totally honest, as black people, I feel sometimes we tend to sugarcoat things or not actually practically talk to our children on a raw level about relationships and things that we've been through. For example, my children know that I've had an abortion and a miscarriage. Why do I share that with my children? Because I think it's important for them to know that I've made mistakes, I've done things, and I think that it has allowed them to know, you know what, I actually don't want to go through it. And if they do, they know that their mum's been through it as well. And, you know, sometimes we try our best not to allow our children to live. We kind of want to just like hold them and make sure that they don't go through the same things that we've been through. But sometimes, just sometimes, our children have to have their own testimony in order to reach the place where we are now at. I was never always at this place, and I dare not say I'm perfect, but I've learned so much and I've gained so much wisdom, and that is because I've made mistakes along the way. But I know that it would have benefited me very well if people transparently spoke to me about sex, spoke to me about relationships, spoke to me about friendships. What are you supposed to expect in a friendship? Or there was an example of friendships around me. I mean, growing up in my teens, I started to see and actually scope and realize that, you know, there are certain characteristics that create a great friendship by seeing people around me, but some children don't get that. So I think it's very important for us to testify to our children about the things that we've been through. We don't need to tell them every bit of our business. We don't have to tell them when we fall out with so and so and I'm not chatting to this and I'm not chatting to that. However, I think it's important to talk to our children about the things that we've been through and we've overcome. I think that's so important. And lastly, I really want to speak to you about family. I think family is so important, especially relationships when it comes to children, especially those who do not have two parents or don't have their parents around or have estranged relationships, whether it's been estranged from the mother, estranged from the father. I think it's so important to talk to your children about how they feel about that, because that is a defining factor that actually loops into their future life and actually loops into the friendships and the relationships that they go into. So it is important to be in constant tune with your children's feelings, going back to opening that line of communication and ensuring that our children actually understand that we are there to speak to them. We are there for them to have a shoulder to lean on. We are there to advise them. We are there to be transparent with them. You know, that we're not going to lie to them. We're not going to baby them, but we will be there for them. And, you know, the hardest thing as a parent, especially when it comes to relationships, is sharing with your children things and them still making the same mistakes. Now, remember what I said before. It is important. Sometimes God sets things up in a way because He wants them to have their own testimony. When they're standing up and they're like, my mum used to tell me this, that and the other and blah, 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 blah. But I had to go down this road for myself. I had to do this for myself. You know, and I think it's important to actually show them great relationships, especially in the Bible. The Bible speaks about the fruit of the Spirit. And, you know, as much as we should have fruits of the Spirit, we should also be looking for that in the opposite person, in our relationships, in our friendships, in our families, you know. So I believe that the fruits of the Spirit is love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, gentleness, self-control. I will put the scripture down below. But yeah, it's just so important to speak to our children about these things. Absolutely so important to speak to our children about these things. I know sometimes this can be difficult, and as I said before, also if you find that this is difficult to talk to your children about, I remember I had a video before, and I will do my best to link it below or link it at the top. But then I will want to link the video before this on top. But anyway, the importance of talking to our children about sex. Now, you know, if our children are looking to get into relationships, it's important to talk to our children about sex, condoms, protection, waiting, ensuring that, you know, knowing that a condom does not cover you from disease. It might just stop pregnancy, but it might not stop pregnancy. The condom can burst. You know, going on these hormone tablets can cause future effect in the later times in your life. Talking to them about why they want to have sex and how they may feel if this is not your lifelong partner and you give yourself to this person. Talking to them about the attachments that it creates, the emotional turmoil that it can cause them. Be transparent with your children. It is so important. You might think that they're young, but trust me, it's if their friends are not talking about it and it's not a conversation in the playground, if the school isn't teaching about it, if they are not watching it on YouTube, they are finding out from many different places, social media, they are finding out. And what better person for them to find out about it than their own parents? We must educate our children and not allow society to educate our children and make them think that, you know, this is the way to go. Anything that they hear should be a confirmation of what your parent is saying. So I hope you've been encouraged by this video. You know, I'm trying my best to keep them very short and ensure that I fill it with as much information as I can. As per usual, I'd love to leave you with a quote from my amazing little book. And it says, motherhood is like going back to school, but the roles are reversed. You are the teacher at the front of the class. It's your job to guide, support, and impact wisdom. And while this might seem scary, it's about going back to basics, trusting your instincts, and letting your heart take the lead. I think this quote is absolutely amazing. And motherhood is like going back to school. Sometimes they ain't gonna do it the way that we do it. And we may not want our children to do it the way that we did it. So we want to teach them new things, and we have to remember the era that they're in. We have to remember that this is a different generation, and we have to learn new things in order to teach our children correctly for what they need in society today. And it's our job to guide, it's our job to support, it's our job to include wisdom. And that is by testifying. That is by talking to our children. And it is important to trust your instincts and let your heart take the lead. If you're feeling like something is not right, act upon it. Don't wait, don't think, oh, they're going to be like, oh, da, 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 da. No, these are your children, they are your responsibility, and you act according to how you and your spirit is telling you to act. Because at the end of the day, We only have ourselves to blame when it comes to our children. We must take the forefront, the headship in our children's life and ensure that we do the best by them, and guarantee you that God will do the rest. I hope that you have been encouraged. I love you all. Take care. God bless. And I will see you in episode